Get away from the car. Step back. This man's trying to steal a Lamborghini. One of the cops barked. The words tore through the marble lobby like a whip. Heads turned. A man dropped his coffee somewhere near the grand piano. A woman yelped and clutched her purse. The source of the chaos, a tall manselant, still wearing clothes that looked like they barely survived the storm. His hoodie hung off one shoulder, shredded at the sleeves. His jeans were torn wide open at the knees, stained at the hem. His shoes didn't match Coney busted open, the other barely holding on. He carried a ripped tote bag that clanked softly with what sounded like crushed cans. His face was shadowed under a low-drawn hood, eyes barely visible, and parked not 5 feet from him, under the glittering archway of the hotel's luxury entrance, sat a black Lamborghini, low and glistening like oil under firelight. The contrast was too much for anyone to ignore. I saw him touching the door handle, someone whispered. He was circling it, looking inside. I think he was about to run with it. The story built itself. Phones came out, cameras rolled. Security stepped back, watching the cops moving. There were no questions, no time for that. One officer yanked the man's arms behind his back. The other shoved him against the hood of the Lamborghini. You really thought you'd get away with this? The cop growled. Dressed like that. The man didn't flinch, didn't resist. He didn't even blink. People stared, some snickered, others filmed shamelessly, angling for the best shot. One woman whispered to her husband, "Why do they always target these luxury places? Like they think no one's watching." The hotel concierge chimed in helpfully. "He's been wandering around the lobby for half an hour. I thought he was here to beg." Have you ever been somewhere people thought you didn't belong just because of how you looked? Not what you did, not who you were, just the clothes on your back. And if you have what hurt more, the way they judged you, or how confident they were that they were right. The officer tightened the cuffs. "What's your name?" The man didn't answer. "Fine. You want to play quiet. Let's see how quiet you stay in a cell." Still no response. Just steady breath, calm posture, a silence that felt like it meant something. Then he said 5 words. Low, controlled. "Let me make one call." The officer scoffed. "Call your lawyer. You've got 60 seconds. But that wasn't the number he dialed. From the ripped jacket pocket, a small voice-activated assistant responded. "Calling Chief Henderson." The phone began to ring, and the entire lobby froze, because the name glowing on that cracked screen wasn't a bluff. It was about to change everything. Stick around, because before the call even reached the other end, something happened no one in that lobby could have expected. The phone kept ringing. "Calling Chief Henderson," the robotic voice repeated softly. And just like that, every sound in the lobby dulled. The clinking of glasses, the jazz piano in the bar, even the clatter of wheels from a guest's Louis Vuitton luggage. All of it faded. The 2 officers froze mid-motion. One glanced at the other. The concierge stopped pretending to fix his tie. The woman with the phone lowered it just slightly but kept recording, just in case something Jewisher came next. The man in cuffs Elijah stood still, his back straight, his breath steady. Too steady. One officer narrowed his eyes. "Who exactly are you calling?" No answer. Another ring. He didn't squirm. He didn't sweat. He looked like a man who'd been here before in cuffs. Maybe a bit under fire, judged, watched, stripped of dignity by people who thought they had the right. But something about him, his posture, the way he held his silence, felt off. Not criminal. Not desperate. Commanding. Have you ever seen someone in a losing position, but still felt like they were the one in control? And did it scare you a little? The younger officer leaned closer, voice colder now. "Is this a prank? If you're wasting our time." Click. The call connected, and from the other end of the line, a voice came through clear, clip, and carrying the kind of authority that doesn't need volume. "This is Chief Henderson." You could have heard a pin drop. The officer blinked, his grip on Elijah's arm loosening just a hair. "Sir," he said into the phone. Unsure now. Elijah didn't speak. He just turned his head slightly, letting the chief's voice do all the talking. "Why?" the chief asked slowly. is Mr. Elijah Kane in handcuffs. The officer's face turned a shade lighter. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Elijah Kane. That name didn't match the outfit. It didn't match the tote bag full of cans or the hoodie with 2 holes. But it matched something else. Something the valet suddenly remembered. There was a key fob. Black, matte, with the letters EK engraved in gold, sitting in the drop-off tray next to a Lamborghini contract folder. The valet's eyes widened. Wait, I think. Too late, because the damage had already been done. Now let me show you who Elijah Kane really is, and why this mistake was about to cost more than just public shame. The silence in the lobby was thick enough to drown in. Chief Henderson's voice still echoed faintly from Elijah's speaker. I asked a question. The younger officer, suddenly unable to meet Elijah's eyes, stammered. As sir, we thought. You thought what? The chief interrupted. That a man in old clothes doesn't belong next to a Lamborghini. No one answered, because everyone from the officers to the doorman to the woman still gripping her phone recognized the name. Elijah Kane, tech mogul, founder of Kane Dynamics. The man who turned a basement battery prototype into a billion-dollar empire. The face of silent wealth, known for avoiding cameras and rejecting luxury fashion sponsorships. And yet today, standing in the middle of a hotel lobby, he'd been mistaken for a street thief. Not because he acted suspiciously, not because he broke a law, but because he looked poor. Funny how fast judgment flips when you know someone's net worth, isn't it? The valet rushed forward now, holding the black key fob with EK in gold letters. His voice cracked. And Mr. Kane didn't realize that a livery was for you? I'm so sorry. Elijah didn't speak. He looked at the key, then at the bag of cans still slumped at his feet, then back at the handcuffs on his wrists. The officers were already unlocking them, movements jerky, like trying to erase what had just happened with speed. One of them muttered, It's policy. Sir, we were following protocol. But Elijah just smiled. Not cruelly, not arrogantly, just tired. Like a man who'd been through this too many times to still be angry. Have you ever been so used to being judged that even being right doesn't feel like winning anymore? As the cuffs dropped to the floor with a cold metallic clink, the crowd took a collective step back. No more filming, no more whispers, just shame and curiosity, because none of them knew why Elijah Kane looked like that today. What they didn't know was that just 2 hours ago, Elijah had been sitting on a folding chair under a bridge, handing out breakfast packs to a line of men with no homes, veterans, addicts, former engineers who lost everything in a divorce, people who used to be him. Because yes, Elijah once slept in a car. A broken, rust-covered hatchback parked 2 blocks from this very hotel. He knew what it meant to walk into a place and be seen as a problem. So today, he put on the clothes that once protected him from rain and shame. And he walked back into that same world not as a billionaire, but as a test, to see if anything had changed. It hadn't, but he had. And now standing cuff-free, with everyone frozen like statues around him, he finally turned to speak. You want to know why I wore this today? Before I tell you exactly what Elijah said, Dan, the silence it created you might want to take a deep breath, because what came out of his mouth next exposed everyone in that lobby. Before I tell you what he revealed in front of the entire restaurant, I know you might be busy. Maybe you've got errands to run, or maybe your mind can only handle so much drama at once. But if stories like this fascinate you, hit subscribe. You don't want to miss how it all unfolds. Because what Elijah Kane said next didn't need volume. It cut clean and it's quiet. He looked up, slowly turning to face the people who'd watched him get cuffed. The guests, the staff, the woman who live-streamed, the man who left. The officer still holding one half of the handcuffs. And then, he spoke. This isn't the first time I've stood in this lobby and been looked at like a problem. You could have sworn the chandelier lights dimmed. He took a step forward. No one moved. I slept blocks from here in my car. 9 years ago, I'd walk past this hotel every day. Broke, scared, wondering what it felt like to belong. His voice didn't shake, but theirs did. A manager whispered, "Oh God." Elijah continued, Today I wore this to remember how people treated me back then, and I see not much has changed. Silence, no one dared interrupt. I built companies that pay this hotel's tech vendors. I donate to the precinct that sent those officers. I own the car you cuffed me on. He wasn't angry. He was just on. And sometimes, that's more terrifying. Because anger you can fight. But truth just sits there, still, immovable. Have you ever heard someone say something so honest it made the air feel heavier? So simple, but sharp enough to slice through your own assumptions? That's what his voice did. And the looks on their face are pale. Stunned proved they'd heard it, too. Elijah looked at the officer who first grabbed him. Next time, ask. Then at the concierge. Next time, look beyond the clothes. And finally, at the woman holding the phone. Next time, think before you post. She lowered her camera. No one said sorry, because no one knew how to. That's when Elijah picked up the Lamborghini key from the valet tray, turned and began walking away. But before he reached the exit, someone asked softly, almost too afraid to be heard, "Why come back here?" Elijah paused, turned, and with the ghost of a smile, he said, "Because this is where they told me I'd never belong." But that wasn't even the real reason he came back. Because what happened next inside the Lamborghini revealed a secret none of them could have guessed. The door of the Lamborghini closed with a sound so soft it barely registered but in Elijah's ears. It was thunder. He was alone now. No flashing phones, no stares, no questions. Just leather seats that hugged his shoulders, the quiet hum of the engine beneath him, and his own breath finally slowing. He sat still, hands on the wheel, eyes on the rearview mirror. The lobby still loomed behind him, marble, chandeliers, gilt-frozen in expensive suits. But he didn't come here to prove a point. Not really. He came for something or someone. He reached under the passenger seat and pulled out a folder worn, creased, but still sealed with a blue stamp. Then he looked at the time. Right on cue. A knock tapped on the passenger side window. A young man stood there, early 30s, tailored gray suit, nervous energy. Elijah unlocked the door. The man slid in, clearly shaken. "You didn't tell me you'd show up dressed like that," the man said, trying to laugh. "I didn't have to," Elijah replied. "I wanted the hotel to show you how they'd treat me." The man fell silent. This wasn't just a social experiment. This was a test for him. His name was Adrian, a mid-level partner from a prestigious VC firm. One of the few people Elijah had agreed to meet about an upcoming acquisition. But before any papers were signed, Elijah had one condition. "Meet me here," he had said. No context, no warning. And now Adrian knew why. Because Elijah didn't want investors who chased headlines. He wanted people who understood silence, discomfort, and what power really looked like when it had nothing to prove. "I'm sorry," Adrian said. "If I'd known." Elijah cut him off. "You knew enough." Then he handed over the folder. Inside, the technical specs for a new battery design. One that could change the future of urban transportation, sure. Faster, off-grid compatible, worth billions. But Elijah wasn't watching Adrian read. He was watching his face, measuring integrity, character. Because today wasn't about money. It was about who would flinch when the mask of wealth came off. And right when Adrian looked apopful, cautious, ready to speak, Elijah asked quietly, "Would you have helped me if I was still sleeping in that car?" Adrian didn't answer right away. But what he did say Elijah didn't expect. Because the next words out of Adrian's mouth would expose a secret he had kept hidden for years. And it would change everything Elijah thought he knew about this meeting. Adrian stared at the folder for a moment longer, then closed it slowly, as if the weight of what was inside needed a moment to settle. But it wasn't the battery specs that had shaken him. It was the question, "Would you have helped me if I was still sleeping in that car?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked out the windshield toward the lobby, now just a mirror of regret behind tinted glass. Then he spoke. "I did sleep in a car." Elijah's head tilted, just slightly. "Adrian didn't blink. Back when I was 15. My mom and I lived in a Nissan Versa for 6 months after she lost her second job. She kept saying it was temporary. I knew she was lying. The confession landed like a quiet detonation. No theatrics, no tremble, just truth. One man to another. Elijah leaned back, eyes narrowing not in suspicion, but in memory. Adrian went on. She used to park behind restaurants after closing. We'd wait for staff to leave. Then she'd heat up leftover bread and a portable microwave. Every night, I stared at neon signs through the fogged-up window and promised myself phony day. I'd on a suit so clean no one would ever guess. He looked down at his sleeve, now perfect gray, no wrinkle in sight. But I forgot, he whispered. I forgot what it cost to earn that silence. Have you ever looked someone in the eye and realized you'd both survived the same fire, but wore different scars? Elijah did, and in that moment, something shifted between them. No longer billionaire and investor. No longer test and candidate. Just two men who had crawled out of the same shadows and now sat in a machine designed for people who'd never touched dirt. Elijah exhaled slowly. That's why you didn't flinch. Adrian nodded. That's why I didn't speak up. He hesitated. But I should have. When they cuffed you, when they shamed you, I should have stepped in. Elijah looked out at the Hotel Fawade, polished, indifferent. You will, he said. Next time. Somewhere else. For someone who doesn't have a chief on speed dial. Silence filled the car again. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was respectful. Then Adrian did something unexpected. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out his signed page of the deal. Already, truth is, he said quietly, I made up my mind before you walked through the door. Elijah looked at the paper, then at Adrian. No smile, just stillness. But his eyes said enough, because sometimes a partnership doesn't start with numbers. It starts with memory. But what neither of them knew was that someone else had watched the entire exchange. Someone from the hotel staff who wasn't ready to let it end that easily. They never noticed the phone aimed through the hotel blinds. Not at first. Not while Elijah and Adrian sat inside the Lamborghini, breathing through layered silence and shared ghosts. But from behind the velvet curtain on the second floor, one staff member had been watching the entire scene, recording it frame by frame. His name was Curtis, hotel assistant manager, always on time, always buttoned up, and always a little bitter. He had watched Elijah walk in earlier, looking like someone who had no business even stepping onto the hotel's welcome mat. He had seen the cuffs go on and felt nothing. But when the man walked out and cuffed, dignified, and stepped into the car, Curtis's stomach twisted. Stunned, he muttered to himself. That's what he believed it was. Not redemption. Not humility. Just another rich man's performance artisting the little people, making everyone look like fools for judging a book by its cover. Curtis zoomed in, captured the handshake between Elijah and Adrian. The key fob, the papers, the two men smiling faintly. And then, he opened his private social account. He began typing. So a billionaire shows up dressed like a hobo to trap working class folks into judging him. Then acts like the victim when cops do their job. Weird flex. Bro, this isn't empathy. It's manipulation. He hit post. Within minutes, comments flooded in. Clout chasing in disguise. Another rich guy cosplaying poverty. Bet he had cameras ready. I feel bad for the officers, not him. The story was mutating. Again, because truth moves slow, outrage flies. Curtis refreshed his feed. The views spiked. Inside the car, Elijah's phone vibrated once, twice. Then Adrian's did too. Both looked down at the same moment and saw the first headline. CEO pretends to be homeless to trick cops, humiliate hotel staff. Elijah sighed, not in surprise, in recognition. Every time you stand still, he murmured, they redraw the target. Adrian looked furious. This is slander. You did nothing wrong. Elijah shook his head. Doesn't matter. Truth needs context. Lies just need a headline. He looked back at the lobby, at the windows, at the people inside, and for the first time that day he considered walking back in. But this time not to defend himself. this time to confront something bigger. Because what Curtis didn't know was that Elijah wasn't just here to test how people treat the poor. He was about to change how this entire hotel did business. Elijah opened the car door and stepped back out into the July sun. No hoodie shadow to hide under this time. No bowed head. Just calm steps heading back toward the same lobby that once swallowed him in silence. Adrian watched through the window, confused. "Where are you going?" he mouthed. Elijah didn't answer, because some messages don't belong behind glass. Inside, Curtis refreshed his post-to-gains munis blooming behind his glasses. But when the lobby doors hissed open and Elijah walked in, upright and quiet, the smugness cracked. People turned. Whispers resumed. Some had seen the post. Others hadn't. A few looked away, ashamed. But this time, Elijah didn't pause. He walked to the front desk and said clearly, "Get me Director Langston." The concierge blinked. "I am not sure he's in today, sir." "He is," Elijah said. "Tell him Elijah Kane wants to finalize the operational review." Every mouth nearby went still. "Operational review?" A voice crackled from the staff earpiece. The concierge nodded quickly and disappeared into the back. 30 seconds later, a tall man in a dark gray suit emerged. Langston, the hotel's general director. He recognized Elijah instantly and didn't even try to fake surprise. "Elijah," he said, stepping forward to shake his hand. "Wasn't expecting you to come back inside." "Didn't plan to," Elijah replied. "But I figured, since we're discussing this property's future, it's best I experience it fully." Langston's smile tightened. "I heard there was an incident." Curtis stood stiff behind the bell desk, trying not to be noticed. Elijah didn't look at him. "Yet, I want the internal footage saved," Elijah said. "All of it. Lobby entrance, valet desk, second floor." Langston nodded. "Already done." And Elijah added, "I want every staff member involved in today's situation scheduled for a one-on-one meeting." Langston paused. "Of course. Are you planning to file formal complaint?" Elijah finally turned his eyes toward Curtis and Lee for a second. "I don't believe in complaints," he said. "I believe in clarity." Have you ever seen power walk into a room without raising its voice yet change the entire atmosphere? That's what this moment was. And the staff knew it. The same man they laughed at this morning now had authority not just over the hotel's reputation, but possibly its future ownership. Curtis shrank slightly, because while Elijah hadn't named him yet, he had just activated the one thing Curtis never expected: accountability. And what Elijah said next would ripple through every floor of that building. Curtis tried to steady his breath. He stayed behind the desk, half hidden, hopping foolishly if Elijah might let it slide. That this billionaire-turned-performance artist would make a grand speech, post something inspirational, then disappear into his Lamborghini and a lifestyle no one else could touch. But Elijah didn't leave. He moved deeper into the lobby, talking with Langston in low tones that carried weight even when whispered. Curtis caught fragments: employee protocols, incident procedures, internal bias training, and then one phrase that stopped his breath cold: equity buy-in. Curtis felt the ground shift beneath him. Langston cleared his throat. "Would you like to meet in the conference suite, Elijah? We can discuss the transition timeline." "No," Elijah said firmly. "Right here's fine." He turned, facing the lobby of Genghis, bellman, front desk, and yes, Curtis too. "Since everyone was so involved in my welcome today," Elijah said, "they might as well hear what comes next." Langston stepped back. Elijah lifted the folder from his coat crisp. "Sign. Legal. This hotel," he said, "is being acquired by a hospitality trust focused on ethical reinvestment. I'm part of the trust." Curtis blinked. "No, it couldn't be." Elijah kept going. "We've been evaluating how certain high-end properties treat their staff and guests specifically. How they treat people who don't fit the visual profile of wealth." Curtis swallowed hard. "And today," Elijah continued, "I got my answer." The silence wasn't tense. It was surgical, because nothing terrifies a person like watching their behavior played back through someone else's authority. Have you ever made a decision so small, so automatic that you only realize its weight? Once someone more powerful stood in front of you. Curtis had, and now he couldn't undo it. Langston asked carefully, "And your recommendation to the board, Mr. Kane?" Elijah looked around the lobby, then said clearly, "Full audit of all guest incident reports from the last 5 years. Staff reviews conducted anonymously. And one last thing." He paused, let the moment breathe, then looked directly at Curtis. No public statement needed, no press, just a note in his filing and a one-on-one conversation with me. Curtis's knees almost buckled. He wasn't fired. Not yet. But he was going to be seen. Really seen. And that was somehow more terrifying than being let go. Because Elijah wasn't here to destroy him. He was here to make sure he remembered. But Curtis wasn't done yet. Because what he did next out of fear or pride would trigger a consequence no one, not even Elijah, had predicted. Curtis's heart pounded against his ribs like fists against a locked door. He wanted to disappear, melt into the walls, crawl under the desk. But more than anything, he wanted control, because what Elijah had just done standing there, stating calmly that Curtis's actions would be remembered, noted, examined wasn't punishment. It was worse. It was exposure. And exposure made Curtis panic. Within minutes, he slipped into the back office, locked the door, and sat at the staff terminal. His fingers trembled slightly as he opened a new draft in the internal staff portal marked confidential, routed only to senior management. He titled it, "Statement Regarding Lobby Incident, Concerns About Guest Entrapment." Then he wrote, "I would like to raise a concern regarding today's event. It appears the guest known as Elijah Kane deliberately presented himself in a deceptive manner, with intent to provoke a reaction from hotel staff and law enforcement. As someone who acted within normal security protocol, I feel the resulting backlash and threat of review may constitute retaliation, or reputational harm." He stopped there, reread it, then added, "While I understand Mr. Kane's status and current involvement with property interests, it is worth asking if staff are being used as props in a narrative designed to shame rather than reform." It felt smart, defensive, but not panicked, accusatory, but wrapped in concern. He had sinned. What he didn't know was that Elijah's team had already set up a passive monitor for internal escalation triggers. 10 minutes later, that email landed on Elijah's tablet, and he read it in full. An hour after that, Curtis was invited into a private meeting suite on the 19th floor. He expected confrontation or a pink slip. Instead, Elijah sat across from him at a small glass table. No assistants, no lawyers, just him and Curtis, eye to eye. Curtis opened with a shaky breath. "Mr. Kane, I meant no offense. I was simply..." "You wrote," Elijah interrupted, "that this was entrapment." Curtis swallowed. "Yes, I didn't know you were connected to ownership. I was following protocol." Elijah tapped the screen gently. "You also implied I used staff as props, that I dressed this way to humiliate you." Curtis couldn't respond, because yes, that's exactly what he implied. But what Elijah said next wasn't angry. It was disarming. "I'm not here to humiliate you, Curtis. I'm here to invite you." Curtis blinked. "What?" Elijah turned the tablet around. On it, a form filled, unsigned. Job title, Director of Equity Sensitivity Training, Pilot Program. Location, multiple international properties. Duration, 6-month paid rotation. Status, pending acceptance. "You've seen the system from the inside," Elijah said. "The bad habits, the assumptions, the blind spots. I don't need someone perfect to fix it. I need someone who's been part of it and can recognize it in others." Curtis stared at the screen. It didn't make sense. This wasn't revenge. It was a test. Of a different kind. And now the question wasn't whether he'd be punished. It was whether he could grow. But Elijah gave him no pressure. Just one final sentence. "You decide. Stay who you were or become someone who remembers what it felt like to get it wrong." What Curtis said next would determine not only his fate, but whether this entire hotel chain could change for good. Curtis stared at the screen. His mouth was dry, his palms sweaty. This wasn't what he expected. Not a warning, not a suspension, not a PR-slick reprimand dressed in legalese. It was a door, wide open and terrifying. He looked up at Elijah, who was watching him not with superiority, but with something Curtis couldn't quite name. Patience, expectation, maybe belief. Curtis cleared his throat. Why me? Elijah folded his hands calmly. Because you got it wrong. Curtis flinched. And then, Elijah continued, you doubled down on being wrong. You tried to rewrite the moment to protect your pride. That's not uncommon. Curtis looked down. Elijah's voice softened. But you also stayed. You didn't run. And that tells me there's something in you that's tired of the script you've been repeating. Curtis sat back, stunned by how close to the bone it cut. Because he was tired. Tired of pretending not to notice when high-paying guests looked through him like wallpaper. Tired of keeping his mouth shut when younger interns got promoted ahead of him. Tired of swallowing shame only to turn around and pass it to someone even lower in the hierarchy. Have you ever been hurt so many times that you started acting like the people who hurt you just so you'd feel like you had control? That's what Curtis had done. And Elijah saw through it. Not to punish, but to offer a mirror. Curtis spoke carefully. I don't know if I'm the right person to lead anything like that. You're not, Elijah said plainly. Not yet. Curtis blinked. But maybe. Elijah added, that's why you should. He let the silence settle. Curtis exhaled. Then, almost imperceptibly, he nodded. Okay. He said, yes. Not like a man accepting a promotion. Like a man choosing not to keep being who he was yesterday. Elijah slid the tablet forward. Curtis added his signature with a trembling finger. It was done. No applause, no fanfare. Just a quiet promise. A beginning. They both stood. Curtis expected Elijah to lead the way. That's how it always went. But instead Elijah waited. And for the first time in Curtis's professional life, it didn't follow. He walked beside, side by side. They stepped out of the room and into the elevator. No one said a word. Because some of the biggest changes don't come with speeches. They come with steps. But just when it seemed everything had reached its resolution, Elijah received one final message. A name had resurfaced to Curtis's past. A name that might unravel something even deeper. The elevator doors slid open. Curtis and Elijah stepped out. The marble lobby now quiet. No phones, no whispers. Just the soft hum of AC and the lingering scent of expensive perfume. But Elijah's phone buzzed once more. He glanced at it and stopped walking. Curtis noticed the change. You okay? He asked. Elijah didn't answer right away. He just held out the screen. Curtis leaned in. On it was a name. Marcus Dean. His breath caught. That name. He hadn't heard it in 15 years. Marcus Dean, the youth counselor at the shelter Curtis was sent to after getting expelled at 17. The one who'd sat with him after a failed shoplifting attempt. Who listened when everyone else lectured. Who gave him a voucher for a suit the day of his first interview. But Marcus wasn't just a counselor. He was a friend. The message on Elijah's screen read, Marcus Dean, deceased 2018. Final request. Have Curtis Hayes notified of my passing. Via Elijah Kane Trust. Curtis's knees almost buckled. He whispered, you knew him. Elijah nodded, quiet. I was one of the donors who funded his last program. Elijah said, he told me about a kid, angry, smart, protective of his little sister. Said he'd make it one day if he didn't self-destruct first. Curtis's eyes burned. And you never said anything? Elijah looked at him. Calm. I didn't know you were that Curtis. Not until today. Not until I saw how you fought back even when you were wrong. That kind of fire, Marcus said, it could burn a city or light it. Curtis covered his mouth with one hand. The man who humiliated Elijah hours ago had once been saved by a man Elijah quietly supported. None of this was random. Curtis whispered, why help me now? Elijah stepped toward the window, gazing out at the city below. Because someone helped me, he said, and I remember what that cost them. Curtis followed his gaze out toward the skyline. Reflected in the hotel glass was a Lamborghini, and beside it the silhouettes. Not boss and subordinate, not billionaire and bellhop, just two men. One who had climbed, and one who had just started. Elijah turned to him just before walking away. Change doesn't start when you rise, he said softly. It starts when you reach back. Then he walked toward the exit. Curtis stood still, watching, and for the first time in his life, he didn't feel small.